The city does not sleep. It merely resets its heartbeat to a frantic artificial tempo. Look at the morning commuter train at 7:42 a.m. Observe the faces pressed against the glass or buried in the glow of handheld rectangles. There is a specific quality to the silence here. It is not the silence of peace, but the heavy, leaden silence of a collective exhale held for 40 years. They move in a singular direction, a river of humanity flowing toward cubicles and offices, theaters of obligation, where they will trade the currency of their lifetime for the thin gruel of approval and a modest pension. There is a paradox here, sharp enough to cut the soul. These men and women are surrounded by millions, yet they are profoundly alone. They are so terrified of the silence of their own company that they fill every interstitial moment of their existence with the static of the crowd, the news cycle, the trivial gossip, the fear-based projections of others. They are like leaves caught in a hypnotic gale, spinning in the patterns of a wind they did not create and cannot control. They have been taught that to be normal is the highest virtue, and to be different is a dangerous exile. Yet, watch the one person standing on the platform who is not looking at a screen. See the one who does not mirror the anxiety of the herd. They stand with a stillness that seems to displace the very air around them. They are not waiting for the train to arrive. They are already present, already elsewhere, already building. While the world demands conformity, they are busy practicing the art of secession. They have realized that the loudest voice in the room is usually the most hollow, and they have chosen to listen to the whisper of their own potential. This is not a scene of abandonment. It is the beginning of a resurrection. The world calls this person aloof. The wise call them awakened. Why do the masses drift? Why does the human mind, capable of contemplating galaxies and composing symphonies, surrender its sovereignty to the trivial opinions of neighbors and the shifting moods of the political landscape? The answer lies in the comfort of the cage. To think for oneself is an act of high-frequency cognitive labor. It requires the constant maintenance of an internal compass, the endurance of social friction, and the courage to exist outside the warm, suffocating embrace of the collective. When an individual adopts the fears and opinions of the crowd, they are effectively outsourcing the burden of self-governance. If one believes what the neighbor believes, one is never wrong, never challenged, and never truly forced to grow. It is a psychological hibernation disguised as a social life. How does this process of the great separation actually function? It begins with the audit of attention. The human consciousness is a limited vessel. We have a finite amount of psychological fuel, let us call it the vitality currency, to spend each day. Most people spend this currency on things they cannot control. The economy, the reputation of strangers, the drama of media, or the expectations of family. This is the path of the spendthrift. They end their days bankrupt, wondering where the time went, not realizing they gave it away to masters who do not care for their soul. To separate is to stop being a beggar at the table of life. The why of this separation is simple. You cannot become a creator of destiny while you are a creature of circumstance. If your mind is a mirror reflecting the world, you are merely a ghost of the world. But if your mind is a forge, you become the smith of your own reality. Recursive thought reveals the truth. The world will only ever offer you what you have already consented to become. If you consent to be a passenger, the world will provide the turbulence. If you consent to be a driver, the world will provide the road. The separation is not a physical act, it is a cognitive revolt. It is the realization that your internal life is a sacred space, and you have been leaving the door wide open for thieves to enter and rearrange your furniture. Once you understand that your thoughts are the architects of your biology, your career, and your legacy, you will no longer tolerate the invasion of the trivial. In the vast, golden savannas of the ancient East, there lived a shepherd named Calin. He was not a king, nor a scholar, but a man who understood the geometry of the horizon. His village sat in a valley where a thick, suffocating mist settled every autumn. The elders taught the youth that beyond the mist lay only monsters and madness. They told them that the village was the only safe place on earth, and that to walk into the hills was to throw one's life into the void. For generations, the people lived in the valley, scraping a living from the rocky soil, terrified of the horizon. They spent their days arguing over who owned which patch of dirt, and their nights huddled together in fear, repeating the stories of the monsters in the mist. Kalen, however, spent his days tending his flock on the lower slopes where the mist was thinner. He noticed something that no one else did. He noticed that the mist did not come from the hills. It rose from the stagnant, polluted pools of the valley floor. He realized that the monsters the elders spoke of were merely the echoes of their own fearful shouts, bouncing off the canyon walls and returning to them as roars. One morning, as the sun began to climb, Kalen did not return to the village. He turned his face toward the steep, jagged path of the mountain. His friends begged him to stop. They told him he was selfish, that he was abandoning his duty to the tribe, that he would surely die. Kalen felt the weight of their judgment, a cold, heavy chain pulling at his spirit. He looked at their eyes, full of the same fearful, glassy surrender he saw every day, and he realized that he could not save them. He could only save himself. He climbed. The ascent was brutal. There was no path, only the biting wind and the burning ache in his lungs. But as he crested the first ridge, the air grew clear and cold. He looked back down and saw the village, a tiny, gray speck drowning in its own gray fog. He looked forward, and there, bathed in the light of a sun they had never seen, lay a sprawling empire of opportunity, fertile plains, and clear, running water. Kalen had not just walked up a hill, he had walked out of a hallucination. He became the first of the mountain walkers. He lived in the village, but his mind lived in the light. The transition from the valley to the mountain is not an event, it is a discipline. To embody this truth today, you must conduct a sovereignty audit. For the next 24 hours, monitor your mental inputs. When you feel the urge to check the news, ask yourself, is this empowering my destiny, or is it feeding my fear? When you find yourself shaping your personality to fit a group, pause and ask, what part of myself am I burying to win this approval? You are building a fortress, and you are the only one who can lay the bricks. Do not look for applause for this work. The crowd will not cheer for your departure, for your silence reminds them of their own noise. This is your sacred stewardship. If this truth resonates with the fire you have been trying to ignite in your own life, know that you are not walking this path alone. By subscribing to this journey and turning on your notifications, you are casting a vote for your higher self, signaling that you are no longer willing to be a passenger in your own story. Commit to the alliance. Let us hold this standard together. If you recognize that you have been living in the fog, leave a like on this message as a silent, irrevocable marker of your decision to climb. You have begun the separation. You have detached your anchor from the rotting pier of the status quo. But the ascent is not merely about leaving the valley. It is about what you must endure once you enter the fire. The higher you climb, the colder the air becomes, and the more the shadows try to convince you that you are losing your way. In the next chapter, we will walk into the crucible. We will explore why the discomfort you feel is the greatest evidence that you are finally, truly waking up. The forge is waiting. Are you prepared to let the fire burn away everything that is not you? Consider the diamond. It begins its existence as common carbon dull, soft and unremarkable, buried deep within the crushing, lightless belly of the earth. There is a profound paradox in its creation. The very thing that the world fears most pressure is the exact mechanism required to elevate it from the mundane to the magnificent. If the carbon were to cry out for comfort, if it were to beg for the release of the crushing tectonic weight, it would remain nothing more than soot, destined to be scattered by the first passing breeze. It is only through the absolute, unyielding intensity of the mountain's embrace that the molecular structure is forced to reorganize, transforming from a fragile substance into the hardest, most radiant element known to man. Look now at the life of the modern seeker. Most approach their ambitions as if they were shopping for comfort in a marketplace. They seek a path that is smooth, a journey that is soft, and a result that is swift. They recoil at the first sign of friction, interpreting every obstacle as a signal to retreat, every challenge as a sign of failure, and every difficulty as a misfortune sent to punish them. They are like the soft carbon, praying for the mountain to move, unaware that the mountain is the only thing capable of birthing their brilliance. Imagine a battlefield at dawn, the air thick with the scent of ozone and cooling iron. The soldiers who fear the fire are the ones who perish. They are the ones who look for shelter in the shadows. But look at the one who stands at the center of the fray, the master of the forge. They do not look at the flying shrapnel and see their end. They see the tools of their own calibration. They understand that the heat is not there to consume them, but to burn away the impurities of their character, the ego, the impatience, the fear of judgment, until only the tempered steel remains. This chapter is the walk into that fire. This is where the separation is solidified. You have left the valley of the drifters. You have now entered the gymnasium of the gods. Why is the human mind so profoundly resistant to struggle? It is because the lower self, the part of the psyche dedicated to biological preservation, equates safety with survival. It operates on the primitive directive of homeostasis, a desire to keep everything consistent, static, and unchanged. But growth, by definition, is the destruction of the status quo. To grow is to die a little, to let go of the version of yourself that is currently comfortable, so that a version capable of handling more can emerge. Why does the soul crave the struggle even while the ego fears it? Because the soul recognizes that we are built for expansion. We are not static objects. We are dynamic processes. If we do not encounter resistance, we lose the capacity to move forward. How does adversity function as an instrument of growth? It acts as the ultimate filter. It separates the idle wishers from the active architects. When the heat of adversity increases, the drifters evaporate. They turn back. They complain. They dilute their efforts. They are like water that boils away when the flame is turned up. But the master, the one who understands the law of transmutation, is like the iron. The heat does not destroy it. The heat makes it pliable, ready to be shaped by the hammer of discipline. Let us apply recursive thinking to the nature of this forge. If you are currently facing a crisis, a financial collapse, a crumbling relationship, a professional setback, you are standing at a crossroads of perspective. You can view the crisis as a barrier, or you can view it as a biological trigger for adaptation. The moment you define the obstacle as the end, you stop looking for the exit. But if you define the obstacle as a necessary weight, you begin to build the muscle to lift it. How can one transmute emotional pain into creative force? It is the process of redirection. The emotional energy spent on worry is an energy of subtraction. It takes from your internal reserves. The emotional energy spent on solution seeking is an energy of addition. It expands your internal capacity. The master realizes that the obstacle is not in the way. The obstacle is the way. The difficulty is the data. It is the universe providing you with the exact set of conditions you need to build the specific quality of character you are currently lacking. If you are weak in patience, the universe will provide an endless series of delays. If you are weak in courage, the universe will provide an endless series of terrifying choices. You are being forged in real time. The question is not, why is this happening to me? But rather, what part of my character is the universe trying to harden? The drifter prays for the storm to stop. The master prays for the skill to sail. The shift in perspective is the threshold of power. Once you stop running from the fire, you discover that you are the one who controls the temperature. In the rugged hills of a land long forgotten, there was a forge that produced the finest blades in the known world. The smith, a man named Hector, was known for a blade that could cut through silk and cleave through granite without ever losing its edge. Kings traveled for months to purchase his steel, and when they asked him for the secret of his craft, he would only point to the fire. There was a young apprentice named Aris, who dreamed of achieving the same mastery. Aris spent his days watching Hector, trying to mimic the motion of his arm and the rhythm of his hammer. But Aris was troubled. He saw how Hector would take a piece of raw iron, ugly, jagged, and rusted, and throw it into the hottest part of the furnace. He saw how Hector would pull it out, glowing white with fury, and beat it with such force that it seemed the metal would shatter. "Master," Aris asked, "why must you treat the iron so cruelly? Why not forge it gently? Surely, if we treat it with more care, it will remain strong and unmarred by the fire." Hector smiled and handed Aris a pair of tongs. "Take this piece of iron," he said. "Put it in the fire until it glows." Aris obeyed. When the iron was red hot, Hector told him to strike it. Aris struck, but the iron was too soft, too fluid. It deformed under his hand, losing its shape. Hector then told him to let it cool completely and strike again. Aris struck, but the iron was cold, brittle, and unyielding. It cracked under the blow, useless and ruined. "You see," Hector explained, "if the fire is too weak, the metal is stubborn and impossible to shape. If the metal is struck without heat, it shatters. If it is struck while too hot, it loses its form. The secret is the temperature. The secret is the timing. The secret is knowing that the fire is not there to destroy the iron, but to reveal its true potential." Aris watched as Hector continued to work. He realized that the blade was not created in the cooling phase. It was created in the moment of greatest intensity, under the most rhythmic, controlled pressure. He saw that every strike of the hammer was a decision to force the metal to become something greater than it was naturally. The iron did not choose the fire, it did not choose the hammer, but it was only through the fire and the hammer that it ceased to be a raw, rusted lump and became a weapon of precision. Years later, Aris became the master. He remembered Hector's lesson not just when he stood at the forge, but when he stood in his own life. When the world pressed down on him, when his plans failed and his heart broke, he did not beg for the fire to stop. He stood tall in the heat, knowing that he was the iron, and that the universe was the smith. He knew that the hammer blows were not the end of his life, but the shaping of his greatness. The forge is not a destination you visit. It is a mindset you carry. To embody this truth, you must stop viewing your current challenges as bad luck and start viewing them as training equipment. If you are feeling the pressure of your circumstances, congratulations, you are being shaped. The sensation of discomfort is simply the feeling of your old, smaller self being pressed out of existence to make room for the larger version of you. Your practice for today is this. Identify the single most significant stressor in your life right now. Do not look for a way to remove it. Instead, sit with it for 10 minutes and ask, what is this struggle demanding of me? Does it demand more patience? Does it demand more boldness? Does it demand more precision in my planning? Once you identify the quality, treat the stressor as your personal trainer. Every time you encounter that struggle, do not respond with anxiety. Respond with the specific character trait that the situation requires. When you do this, the struggle ceases to be a burden and becomes a teacher. If you are tired of shrinking from the heat and are ready to be tempered into the person you know you can be, subscribe to this channel. Joining this alliance is your commitment to stay in the forge, to hold your position, and to refuse to let your character soften when the world gets loud. You are part of a lineage of masters now. If you have made the decision to view your current obstacles as the foundation of your future strength, click the like button. Let this be your acknowledgement to yourself and to the universe that you are willing to do the hard work of self-forgery. You have recognized the fire. You have begun to understand that the intensity of your current life is not a tragedy, but a grand preparation. But the forge is only the second gate. You have hardened your spirit, but have you hardened your time? You have learned to endure the fire, but have you learned to stop waiting for the flames to die down? You are ready to enter the most seductive trap of the modern age, the illusion that there is a perfect moment to begin. In the next chapter, we will dismantle the myth of the someday and show you how to seize the power of the absolute, uncompromising now. The bridge to your future is constructed of immediate action. Will you take the first step, or will you wait for the path to clear? The gates are opening. Prepare yourself. Imagine a grand, Victorian-era train station at the edge of a vast, uncharted wilderness. The air is thick with the soot of 1,000 idle engines. Thousands of travelers roam the platform, their trunks packed, their tickets clutched tightly in trembling hands. They are all, by their own admission, headed for the land of potential, a destination of prosperity, peace, and fulfilled purpose. But look closely at the rails. The steel is rusted, orange with the decay of years of disuse. The engines, though magnificent in design, are cold, their boilers empty, their pistons seized by the stagnation of expectation. Every traveler is locked in a polite, desperate dance of postponement. One whispers that they shall board when the weather turns mild. Another claims they require a different, more comfortable coach. A third waits for a signal from a distant, unseen conductor who has not stepped onto the platform in decades. They spend their hours comparing the labels on their luggage, critiquing the architecture of the station, and debating the merits of the journey. Yet not a single soul climbs into the carriage to release the brake. The paradox is haunting. They are all waiting for the perfect moment to depart, failing to realize that the station itself is a trap. The station is not a waypoint. It is an institution of delay. It is a place where dreams go to atrophy, where the vibrant color of ambition fades into the monochromatic gray of someday. They are dying of thirst while standing on the bank of the river because they are waiting for the water to be a different temperature. They do not realize that the movement of the train is what creates the breeze that cools the journey. They are waiting for the traffic lights of destiny to turn green, never comprehending that there are no lights on the open road. There is only the engine, the fuel, and the will to ignite it. Why does the human mind, which has conquered oceans and split the atom, cower before the simple, terrifying necessity of the now? The phenomenon of procrastination is not merely a lack of discipline. It is a profound, unconscious fear of finality. As long as one is preparing to act, the dream remains perfect. It is untarnished by reality, unburdened by failure, and shielded from the harsh light of judgment. To wait is to live in the realm of the ideal, where one can imagine oneself as a titan without ever having to risk being an amateur. Why do we nurture the myth of tomorrow? Because the tomorrow self is a fantasy character. This future version of us is wealthier, more courageous, more organized, and more capable. By projecting our salvation onto this phantom, we exempt our present selves from the discomfort of the struggle. We use the future as a storage locker for our unfulfilled promises, believing that by simply shifting the date, we are somehow achieving progress. How does this cycle destroy the soul? It creates a psychological divide between who you are and who you wish to be. This dissonance is the root of modern anxiety. When you constantly tell yourself that you will begin when the conditions are right, you are essentially telling your subconscious mind that the current you is inadequate, that your power is contingent upon external circumstances. You are teaching your brain to be a victim of the clock rather than a master of the moment. The recursion of this truth is brutal. If you cannot act now, why would you act then? If your character is defined by the habit of delay, then tomorrow is simply today's ghost. The conditions you wait for, the perfect funding, the perfect health, the perfect mental clarity, are not prerequisites for success. They are the byproducts of movement. The master understands a radical reversal of the common logic. Clarity is not the cause of action. Action is the cause of clarity. You cannot think your way into a new life. You must act your way into it. The universe does not reward the brilliance of your plans. It responds to the kinetic energy of your execution. Every moment you spend analyzing is a moment you are not becoming. To kill the myth of tomorrow, you must accept that the perfect time is a fiction designed to protect you from the risk of your own potential. The only right time is the moment you decide that the pain of staying the same has finally exceeded the pain of moving forward. In the late 19th century, in a South still scarred by the bitter memory of bondage, there lived a woman whose very existence was a defiance of the impossible. Born in the shadow of slavery, orphaned at 7, and widowed at 20, Madam C. J. Walker was a woman to whom the world had handed nothing but the laundry basket. For years, she labored over steaming tubs for a pittance, her hands raw, her back bent, her days measured in cycles of toil that seemed to have no end. She could have been a lifetime resident of the train station of some day. She could have waited for the laws of her nation to change, for the economy to favor her, or for a benefactor to recognize her plight. The statistics of her era screamed that her path was closed. But Sarah Breedlove, later known as Madam C. J. Walker, was not a passenger. She was a woman who understood that the future was not something you awaited. It was something you manufactured. She noticed a simple, overlooked need. Women like her were suffering from scalp ailments due to a lack of proper care products. She did not have a laboratory. She did not have a degree in chemistry. She did not have a business plan drafted by Ivy League consultants. She had a kitchen, a stove, and a burning, singular intent. She began experimenting with formulas in her own home, mixing ingredients while her neighbors slept. When the first batches were ready, she did not wait for a distribution network. She went door to door, selling her vision one tin at a time. She was rejected. She was mocked. She was told that a woman of her station had no business seeking empire. But she possessed the law of personal initiative. She acted on what she had, where she was, with the tools at her disposal. She did not wait to be an expert. She became an expert through the process of building. She did not wait for the right moment. She made every moment the right moment. By the time she was done, she had built a multi-million-dollar empire and created thousands of jobs for women who had previously been told they were invisible. She died not as a laborer, but as a legend. Her life stands as a testament to the fact that the staircase of success is not revealed by standing still. It is revealed only when you take the first, trembling step into the dark. The myth of tomorrow is the greatest thief of your existence. To dismantle it, you must practice the physics of now. This requires a shift in your daily operations. Treat every day as if you are already the person you intend to become. Do not wait for the promotion to work like a leader. Do not wait for the capital to act like a visionary. Do not wait for the inspiration to create like an artist. Your practical application is the 2-minute breach. Identify one task that you have been delaying, that one thing you know you should do, but have been shielding behind the mask of preparation. Set a timer for 2 minutes and execute the first, smallest, most imperfect step toward its completion. If you want to write a book, write one sentence. If you want to build a business, send one email. If you want to transform your health, perform one push-up. By doing this, you break the hypnotic rhythm of the station of someday. You prove to your subconscious that you are not a dreamer, you are a doer. If you are finished waiting for the perfect moment and have decided to take the helm of your own engine, subscribe to this channel. This is your commitment to the path of the master, the path of the active, not the idle. We are building a movement of people who do not wait for the signal. We are the signal. If you feel the truth of this message in your marrow and you are ready to stop outsourcing your destiny to the future, click the like button. Let it be the definitive sound of you boarding the train. Your journey begins with this click. You have now confronted the temptation of delay. You understand that the station is a lie and that the tracks only exist for those who are moving. But even when you begin to move, you will find that the internal resistance, the voice that lives in the shadows of your mind, will begin to scream. You have broken the external chains of conformity and the internal shackles of procrastination, but there is a master voice that controls your every thought. If you do not learn to command this internal dialogue, it will dictate your failure even while you are working. In the next chapter, we enter the most sacred, high-stakes chamber of all, the dialogue within. We shall audit the sermon you preach to your own soul. Are you ready to speak to yourself like a king, or will you continue to whisper the insults of a beggar? The door to the inner dialogue is ahead. Open it, and be prepared to never hear yourself the same way again. Consider the quietest place on earth, a high-fidelity anechoic chamber, insulated from the tremors of the world, designed to eliminate every external decibel. The human beings who enter these chambers often find themselves in a state of sudden, existential vertigo. Without the white noise of the city, the hum of traffic, or the vibration of distant machinery, they begin to hear something that was always there, yet never noticed. They hear the frantic, rhythmic pumping of their own blood. They hear the rasping friction of their own breath. And eventually, they hear the voice, the internal narration that never truly sleeps. It is a paradox of human existence that while we spend our lives seeking silence to escape the cacophony of the world, we are simultaneously terrified of the only true silence that matters, the silence where we are left alone with ourselves. Observe the man walking down a deserted street at midnight. He is not truly alone. He is engaged in a heated, ongoing debate with a ghost. He is rehearsing an argument from 3 years ago. He is replaying the criticism of a supervisor. He is reciting the inventory of his perceived failures. This voice is the unseen architect of reality. It is a cinematic narrator that colors the world with its own bias. If the narrator is cynical, the world becomes a place of trapdoors and betrayals. If the narrator is confident, the world becomes a playground of opportunity. Most people treat this inner dialogue as an objective recording of truth, failing to realize that they are the ones writing the script. They are, in essence, broadcasting a sermon to their own subconscious, 24 hours a day, filling their own mental atmosphere with the smog of self-doubt. They wonder why their lives feel heavy, never realizing that they are the ones casting the spells that bind their own feet. The law of autosuggestion is not a New Age curiosity. It is a foundational mechanic of the human psyche. It is the bridge between the conscious mind, the gatekeeper of logic, and the subconscious mind, the fertile soil of the soul. The subconscious does not possess a sense of humor, nor does it possess the ability to discern between a metaphor and a command. It is a literalist, a tireless servant that accepts every thought you repeat with emotional intensity as an absolute binding law. Why do we allow this servant to build our prison? Why do we permit ourselves to speak to our own souls in a tone we would never tolerate from a stranger? It is because we have confused honesty with harshness. We believe that to be realistic about our flaws is a virtue, yet we fail to see that our focus creates our reality. How does the recursive cycle of self-talk manifest into our physical circumstances? It begins with the seed thought. You tell yourself, "I am tired," or "I am incapable." The subconscious takes this command and begins to organize your physiological responses to match it. It lowers your energy levels, it mutes your creative problem-solving capabilities, and it nudges you toward behaviors that validate your original premise. You become the author of your own exhaustion. How can we invert this process? We must treat our thoughts with the forensic rigor of a detective. If you heard a friend telling you the things you tell yourself in the dark of night, you would likely defend them with rage. You would demand they stop their self-destruction. And yet, you are the most consistent, most intimate, and most credible speaker in your own life. If you are preaching a gospel of defeat, you will manifest a life of lack. If you are preaching a gospel of mastery, your spirit will eventually have no choice but to align. The recursion here is vital. If you do not change the internal dialogue, you cannot change the external result. But the dialogue is not changed by mere positive thinking that is a thin, plastic coating on a rotten foundation. The dialogue is changed by the intervention of authority. You must step into your own mind and act as a commanding officer. When the negative thought arises, you do not politely ask it to leave. You revoke its credentials. You subject it to a trial. Does this thought serve the definite chief aim of my existence? If no, it is a lie, and it is hereby evicted. This is the discipline of the master. It is the relentless, daily, and hourly maintenance of the sanctity of your own mind. In the harrowing landscape of the late 19th century American South, there lived a woman named Ida B. Wells. She lived in an environment designed specifically to crush the human spirit through systemic terror. She was born into a reality where the world constantly bombarded her with the same message. You are less. You are powerless. You are a target. Every newspaper headline, every street-side encounter, and every law of the land was a form of relentless, psychological warfare designed to force her to internalize a narrative of inferiority. If Ida had listened to the broadcast of her environment, if she had allowed the voice of the crowd to become her inner dialogue, she would have vanished into the shadows of history. She would have been silenced, not by the guns of the mobs, but by the quiet death of her own conviction. But Ida B. Wells possessed a fortress. Before she ever picked up a pen to challenge the injustice of her nation, she had to master the conversation within. She spoke to herself with a different authority. She told herself that her life was not an accident, but a mission. She convinced herself that the truth was not a fragile thing to be protected, but a weapon to be wielded. She engaged in a continuous, high-stakes dialogue with her own courage. When fear whispered that she would be killed for her writings, her inner voice countered with the command of her purpose. The people must know. She didn't just survive. She became a force of nature. She stood in rooms where she was the only woman, the only person of her color, the only one standing against the tide, and she spoke with a resonance that shattered the atmosphere of the status quo. She did not need to shout, because the authority in her internal dialogue had forged a presence that commanded the silence of the room. She turned the no of the world into the yes of her mission. She proved that, when the inner dialogue is anchored in an unshakable purpose, the external world is not a force that controls you. It is merely a set of conditions that you are commissioned to transform. She was not a victim of her time. She was the architect of her own impact. The mastery of your inner dialogue is the ultimate act of leadership. It is the moment you stop being the victim of your own moods and start being the sovereign of your own mind. To embody this today, you must implement the cancel and replace protocol. For the next 24 hours, you are to be the guardian at the gate of your own thoughts. When a self-deprecating, fearful, or doubtful thought enters your mind, you must catch it mid-sentence. You must audibly or mentally, with absolute conviction, say, cancel. And in that precise vacuum, you must inject the absolute truth of who you are becoming. Do not settle for neutral replacements. Replace "I am afraid" with "I am prepared for the challenge." Replace "I don't know if I can" with "I am learning exactly what is required to win." You are rewriting the code of your operating system. You are replacing the legacy software of victimhood with the high-performance architecture of mastery. This is a relentless practice. The old program will try to reboot. Your job is to stay at the terminal and keep overriding it until the new code becomes your automatic reality. If you recognize the power of the sermon you are preaching to your own soul and are ready to take command of that pulpit, subscribe to this channel. Joining this alliance is your commitment to the daily audit of your own mind. We do not drift into clarity. We focus into it. Join us, and keep the frequency of your internal dialogue aligned with the height of your potential. If you are prepared to evict the self-limiting beliefs that have lived rent-free in your mind for too long, click the like button. Let it be the symbol of your eviction notice to your past self. You are clearing the house for a new occupant. You have now learned to navigate the treacherous waters of your own consciousness, and you have seen that when the inner world is ordered, the outer world follows. But there is a heavy, dark anchor that most people drag behind them, a burden of past regrets, old wounds, and historical shames that prevents them from fully engaging with their future. Even if you command your voice like a king, you cannot walk toward your destiny if your feet are tethered to the wreckage of your past. In the next chapter, we will confront the most difficult hurdle of the human experience, the necessity of radical self-forgiveness. We will show you how to cut the emergency brake of your life so you can finally surge forward. Are you ready to forgive yourself for the person you were, so that you can become the person you are destined to be? The path to your liberation is just ahead. Picture a man standing upon a high, wind-swept plateau. He is dressed for a journey, his eyes fixed on a distant summit that glows with the promise of the rising sun. He is a man of clear intent, his strides long, and his resolve firm. Yet, as he attempts to move, a heavy, discordant sound fills the air, a metallic, grinding screech of iron against stone. He stumbles, his body yanked backward with every forward movement. He is pulling a gargantuan, rusted iron cart behind him, a chaotic pile of debris that has collected over the decades. It is filled with the shattered glass of old arguments, the heavy chains of past failures, the rotted timber of missed opportunities, and the rusted spikes of regrets he has refused to discard. He is trying to race toward his destiny, but he is fundamentally sabotaged by the very thing he refuses to leave behind. He argues that the cart is part of his history, that these items are proof of who he is. He believes he cannot simply abandon the cart, for in doing so, he feels he would be abandoning his own story. He does not realize that the cart is not proof of his character. It is a graveyard for his future. The paradox is as cruel as it is common. The person who clings to their past as a badge of honor is the very same person who will never have a present worth living. The atmosphere of his struggle is thick with the scent of stagnant water and cold, neglected iron. He is a prisoner who holds the key to his own cell, yet he spends his life complaining about the dampness of the walls. He waits for a rescue that will never come, unaware that the only way to reach the summit is to unhook the harness, to let the cart roll back into the abyss, and to finally, terrifyingly, feel the weightlessness of a soul that has decided to let go. Why do we remain shackled to the wreckage of our own history? It is because of a profound, albeit misguided, instinct for consistency. The human mind fears the unknown more than it fears the familiar, even when the familiar is a source of agony. We carry our pasts because we fear that if we were to set them down, we would become someone we don't recognize. We are terrified of the blank slate. Why is forgiveness the most strategic move a high achiever can make? Because guilt is an energy siphon of the highest order. It occupies the background process of the brain. You may be consciously focusing on your definite chief aim, but if your subconscious is running a program of self-condemnation, that internal noise will cause your focus to fracture and your momentum to dissipate. How does the recursive nature of unforgiveness work? It is a loop of circular logic. I failed, therefore I am a failure. Therefore I deserve the pain of this failure. This loop prevents the acquisition of wisdom. Wisdom requires the ability to extract the lesson from the experience and discard the emotional waste. When you hold on to the shame, you are not learning. You are merely preserving the pain. How do we break this cycle? We must adopt the philosophy of the metabolic mind. Just as the body must digest nutrients and expel waste to remain healthy, the mind must digest experience and expel regret. To hold on to a grudge or a self-inflicted shame is to store emotional waste in your system until it turns toxic. This toxicity manifests as cynicism, procrastination, and a hardening of the heart. The philosophical truth is this: you cannot be a leader of the future if you are still prosecuting the past. The court of your own mind is rigged. If you act as the prosecutor, the judge, and the jury, you will always find yourself guilty. You must, through a deliberate act of will, declare an amnesty. You must understand that the person who committed the mistake you regret is not the person you are today. That person was operating with a lower level of consciousness, a different set of experiences, and a different map of reality. To judge your past self with your present wisdom is a logical fallacy. You have changed, therefore the debt is paid. The strategy of the master is to be a river, not a reservoir. A river is in constant motion, washing itself clean as it journeys toward the sea. A reservoir is a standing pool. If it does not release what it holds, it becomes stagnant. Forgiveness is not a warm, fuzzy feeling. It is a calculated, cold-blooded decision to reclaim your resources. You are releasing the brake so the car can finally move at the speed for which it was engineered. In the harrowing, blood-soaked days of the American Civil War, there moved a woman whose name became synonymous with the impossible. Clara Barton, a woman of fragile constitution and limited means, saw the suffering of soldiers on the front lines and decided, in an age where women were confined to the periphery, to walk directly into the heart of the carnage. She became the angel of the battlefield, not because she had a desire for glory, but because she could not abide the waste of human potential. Years after the war, when the wounds had scarred over but the memories remained raw, an acquaintance sought to engage Clara in a conversation about a long-standing wrong. This person had spent years nursing a grievance against a man who had betrayed Clara's trust and cost her dearly. The acquaintance assumed that Clara, having been wronged so deeply, would surely share in the resentment. They brought up the betrayal, recounted the details, and waited for Clara to join in the bitterness. Clara Barton looked at the acquaintance with a calm, piercing clarity. She did not express outrage. She did not recount the injury. She simply said, "I distinctly remember forgetting that." The room grew quiet. The acquaintance was stunned. To them, the incident was a landmark of their shared history. To Clara, it was a piece of junk and object that had been taking up valuable shelf space in her mind. She had performed a mental house cleaning. She had realized that if she held on to the memory of the betrayal, it would require a constant expenditure of her limited vitality. It would force her to be a victim in her own thoughts, to revisit the scene of the crime daily, to nurse the wound until it became an identity. Clara Barton understood that her work, the founding of the American Red Cross and the saving of thousands of lives, required a vessel that was empty of bitterness. She could not serve the future if she was occupied by the debris of the past. She did not forget out of weakness. She forgot out of supreme, strategic strength. She knew that every grievance was a chain, and she had spent her life becoming a free woman. She chose to be a river. She chose to flow. And because she refused to be a reservoir of pain, she became an ocean of influence. The emergency brake is a habit of the mind, and like any habit, it can be uninstalled. To embody this truth today, you must perform the act of eviction. Take a pen and a blank sheet of paper. Write down the 3 regrets, grievances, or past failures that you have been carrying like weights. Write them in specific detail. Look at them. Acknowledge that they happened. Then, realize that they exist nowhere but in your own memory. They have no power over your current reality unless you grant them permission to sit at your table. Burn the paper. Watch the flame consume the record. This is a symbolic act, but it is a psychological signal to your subconscious that the emergency brake has been cut. From this moment forward, when the thought of those failures enters your mind, you are to immediately invoke the mantra, "I am a river, not a reservoir." Do not dwell on the history. Focus on the next movement. You are not the person who made those mistakes. You are the person who survived them and learned from them. If you are prepared to shed the weight of your past and reclaim the energy that has been held captive by your regrets, subscribe to this channel. You are joining an alliance of individuals who are committed to the future, who understand that the price of greatness is the willingness to leave the wreckage behind. Your evolution is our mission. If you have made the decision to release the emergency brake and surge forward with the momentum of a free soul, click the like button. Let it be the final nail in the coffin of your victimhood. You have learned to separate from the crowd, to harden your spirit in the fire, to act in the face of the someday myth, to command your inner dialogue, and now, to release the anchor of your past. You are becoming a person of terrifying potential. But even with a cleared mind and a released brake, you remain vulnerable if you do not master the focus of your environment. You are about to enter the most silent and powerful phase of your journey, the architecture of focus. We are going to look at why your space, your habits, and your social circle are the silent architects of your destiny. The next chapter will reveal how to organize your world so that doing the right thing becomes the path of least resistance. The fortress is being built. Are you ready to organize the stone? Observe the modern sanctuary, the study, the office, the workspace. To the untrained eye, it appears to be a center of production. There is a computer, a stack of folders, a mobile device tethered to the wall, and the hum of background media. But look closer. It is not a sanctuary. It is a museum of fragmentation. There is a sticky note from a forgotten errand, an unread book from 3 months ago, a pile of correspondence that has lost its urgency, and a digital notification icon that pulses like a feverish heartbeat. The atmosphere is thick with the scent of busyness, that stale, metallic odor of someone who has moved all day without traveling a single mile. There is a profound, tragic paradox at work here. The more tools we possess to maintain our focus, the more fractured our focus becomes. We are like a farmer who owns 1,000 plows, but lacks the single seed of intent to break the ground. We scatter our energy across 100 trivial horizons, wondering why our fields remain barren while our hands are calloused with the effort of doing everything. The silence in such a room is not the silence of contemplation. It is the silence of a vacuum waiting to be filled by the next distraction. If one were to sit in the center of this room and breathe deeply, one would feel the frantic, high-frequency static of a mind being pulled in 10 directions at once. This is the habitat of the drifter. They are architects of clutter, building lives defined by the sheer volume of their distractions rather than the weight of their impact. They mistake movement for progress, believing that because they are running, they must be winning the race. They do not realize that a rocking chair provides plenty of motion, yet it never leaves the porch. To become an architect of focus, one must first be willing to act as a demolitionist of the unnecessary. The fundamental law of achievement is the law of concentration. Energy, like water, is only useful when it is directed. A gentle stream, if allowed to spread across a flat plain, becomes a marsh, a stagnant, shallow expanse that breeds nothing but weeds and rot. But if you build strong banks for that same water, the depth increases, the pressure rises, and the current transforms into a force capable of carving canyons or turning the wheels of industry. Why does the human mind despise this discipline? Why do we feel a perverse comfort in the sprawl of our obligations? It is because the scattered life protects us from the terror of the singular aim. If you are doing 20 things, you can always blame your lack of success on the volume of your work. But if you commit your entire soul to one singular, profound purpose, you are left naked. There is nowhere to hide. If the goal is not achieved, the failure is yours alone. Procrastination and distraction are the ego's way of ensuring that we never have to face the cold, hard truth of our own potential. How does the recursive cycle of distraction as defense manifest? It creates a feedback loop of anxiety. You feel overwhelmed by the clutter, so you seek entertainment to soothe the overwhelm. The entertainment further fragments your attention, making the original work seem even more daunting. You then retreat further into the clutter to avoid the reality of your stagnation. You are effectively poisoning the well you drink from. To deconstruct this, one must ask, what is the cost of my multitasking? The answer is the death of excellence. Excellence is not a function of speed. It is a function of depth. You cannot achieve depth if you are constantly skimming the surface. The master understands that focus is not a limitation. It is a multiplier. If you have 10 units of energy and you divide them by 10 tasks, you are left with 1 unit for each, not enough to move anything significant. But if you focus all 10 units on one task, the force is absolute. How do we architect this focus? It begins with the ruthless, systematic pruning of the non-essential. You must become the curator of your own reality. Every object in your workspace, every notification on your device, and every commitment on your calendar must pass the test of utility. Does this contribute to the definite chief aim of my life? If the answer is no, it is not just a neutral element, it is an active threat to your destiny. The master treats distractions not as inconveniences, but as thieves. To allow a distraction to persist is to open your door to a burglar and ask them to rearrange your life. In the quiet, austere laboratory of the late 19th century, a man sat in total, unwavering silence. He was not a man of the world. He was a man of the air, the ether, and the hidden frequencies of the universe. Nikola Tesla lived in a world of his own design. While his contemporaries in the scientific community were scrambling to secure patents, chasing the favor of financiers, and engaging in the loud, performative theater of the great inventor, Tesla walked a different path. He understood that the physical world was merely a shadow of the mental world. Tesla did not start his inventions on a workbench. He started them in the cathedral of his own mind. He would spend days, sometimes weeks, in a state of absolute sensory deprivation-like focus. He would construct his machines in his imagination, down to the last gear, the last winding of copper wire, and the exact tension of the bolts. He would let the machine run in his mind until he could see the potential points of friction or wear. He would test his inventions in the laboratory of his soul before a single piece of metal was ever shaped. His colleagues often whispered that he was obsessed or socially stunted. They laughed at his habit of spending hours watching a sunrise or walking through a park in silence. They did not understand that he was not doing nothing. He was architecting. He was clearing the static of the world so that the frequencies of the universe could pass through him without interference. He was a master of his environment, curating his life so that his mind remained a pristine, high-resolution mirror for his work. When he finally brought his inventions into the material world, they were not prototypes in the messy sense. They were masterpieces of finished intent. He had already lived the process of creation in the silence. He had burned through the friction in his imagination. He had learned the lessons of failure in his dreams, so that when he built the real thing, it worked with a precision that bordered on the divine. Tesla taught the world that the greatest power is not found in the hustle, but in the hush. He was the architect of his own focus, and because he controlled his internal environment with such ruthless, divine discipline, the physical world had no choice but to bend to his will. He did not need to chase the crowd, The crowd eventually had to come to him, drawn by the undeniable light of a mind that had mastered itself. The architecture of focus is built in the quiet. To embody this truth, you must create a sanctuary of intent. You cannot expect to build a masterpiece in the middle of a carnival. For today, you must identify your sacred space, a room, a corner, or even a specific chair where no distraction is permitted to enter. When you step into this space, you are signaling to your subconscious that the world of the trivial is over, and the world of the significant has begun. Your practice for today is the removal protocol. Enter your primary workspace and look around. Identify the 3 items, applications or habits, that consistently draw your focus away from your definite chief aim. Remove them. If it is an app, delete it. If it is a pile of clutter, organize or discard it. If it is a person who consistently drains your focus with their drama, create a hard boundary. You are not being mean, you are being masterful. You are protecting the field of your future from the weeds of the present. If you are ready to stop being a casualty of your own clutter and want to join a community of architects who build their lives with deliberate singular focus, subscribe to this channel. This is your commitment to the sanctuary, the commitment to protect your energy at all costs. We are building the fortress, brick by brick. If you have made the decision to be the demolitionist of your own distractions and are ready to reclaim the sovereign territory of your attention, click the like button. Let it be the signal that you have cleared the space for greatness. You have now learned to order your thoughts, forgive your past, and architect your space. You are creating a life that is truly built. Yet, even with all these tools, the fire, the dialogue, the release, and the focus, there remains a final, haunting mystery. Many have all the pieces, yet they fail to see the results. They grow weary. They plant the seed, they water the soil, they prune the weeds, but they panic when the harvest does not appear on their timeline. They do not understand the law of gestation. They do not know that there is a season of darkness that is not death, but preparation. In the next chapter, we will discuss why you must be willing to wait without ceasing, how to develop the farmer's faith that survives the winter. The harvest is guaranteed, but only for those who stay on the field. Are you ready to master the patience of the gods? The harvest is waiting. In the quiet corners of the world, there exists a tree known as the Chinese bamboo. If one were to plant its seed in the rich, dark loam of the earth, one would see absolutely nothing for the first year. The ground remains undisturbed, a flat, unremarkable patch of dirt that offers no hint of the life pulsing beneath. One would water it, one would fertilize it, and yet the soil would remain silent. The second year passes, and still, there is no sprout to greet the sun. The third year, the fourth year, nothing. To the casual observer, the farmer is a fool, pouring his resources into a graveyard of ambition. The neighbors pass by, whispering of his wasted time, his foolish devotion to an empty plot. But beneath the surface, the impossible is taking place. While the eye sees a void, the earth is hosting a radical, unseen expansion. The bamboo is not sleeping. It is engaged in the most strenuous act of construction imaginable. It is weaving an intricate, subterranean web of root systems, a vast, dense, and tangled foundation designed to anchor it against the fury of future storms. It is building the structural capacity to support the weight of a giant. Consider the paradox. We live in a culture that worships the harvest, yet despises the planting. We crave the 80-foot height, yet we are offended by the 5 years of nothing. We are a people obsessed with the now, blind to the fact that the most profound shifts in our existence occur in the darkness, where no one can applaud us, where no one can witness our growth, and where the evidence of our labor is entirely hidden from the world. We look for the fruit before we have even developed the root. We mistake the darkness of the soil for the darkness of failure. But the Master knows that this is not a period of waiting, it is a period of hardening. It is the gestation of the greatness that is inevitably, mathematically, and biologically bound to rise. The law of gestation is the rhythmic pulse of the universe. It dictates that for every seed, there is a season of darkness, a gestation period during which the manifestation is invisible, but the development is absolute. Why is the human ego so terrified of this gestation? It is because the ego is addicted to the dopamine of proof. We require the immediate feedback of results to feel that we are on the right path. Why do we feel this need? Because we have defined our self-worth by our output rather than our capacity. How does this impatience sabotage our potential? It leads to the digging up fallacy. Just as a child might dig up a seed to see if it has sprouted, thereby killing it, we kill our dreams by constantly interrupting our own development. We check our bank accounts, we analyze our social metrics, we seek validation for work that is still in the root-growing phase. Every time we do this, we shatter our concentration and introduce the poison of doubt into our internal architecture. We take the energy that should be used for growth and redirect it toward anxiety. Why is this process recursive? Because the anxiety of the missing result creates a vibration of scarcity, which in turn attracts more reasons for delay. The law operates on precision. You cannot command the harvest, but you can command the quality of the root. How do we transcend this? By embracing the principle of process attachment. The drifter is attached to the outcome. The master is attached to the process. The master understands that time is not a linear march toward a goal. It is a cyclical opportunity for refinement. When the results are absent, the master does not assume the dream is dead. They assume the foundation is being strengthened. They ask, am I building the capacity to hold the success I am chasing? Many people lose their fortunes, their marriages, or their health the moment they achieve their goals because they never built the roots required to sustain the height. The gestation period is the cosmic grace period. It is the time the universe gives you to grow large enough so that when the harvest comes, you do not collapse under its weight. How does one live within this law? By adopting the faith of the farmer. The farmer does not stand over the field in the middle of the night screaming at the soil to produce corn. He knows the physics of the earth. He does his part. He sows, he waters, he clears the weeds, and then he rests. He understands that the universe has a schedule that respects the laws of growth, not the schedule of his impatience. You must learn to work with the same quiet, unshakable confidence. Do not measure the bamboo by the sky. Measure it by the integrity of the root. In the early decades of the 20th century, two bicycle mechanics from Dayton, Ohio, set out to achieve the impossible. Orville and Wilbur Wright were not scientists of stature, nor were they backed by the immense coffers of the government. They were men of precision, men of grease and gears, driven by a vision that the world deemed a hallucination, the ability of man to defy the laws of gravity. For years, the brothers retreated to the desolate dunes of Kitty Hawk. There was no glory in their endeavor. There were no cameras to record their efforts, no investors to applaud their breakthroughs, and no headlines to document their struggle. There was only the relentless, punishing wind, the shifting sand, and the countless, mangled machines that ended in failure. They crashed again and again. They spent their days analyzing the flight of birds and the mathematics of the air, and their nights repairing the wings they had shattered during the day. To the outside world, they were failures. They were wasting their lives on a fool's errand. They were in the gestation of their greatness, and for the vast majority of that time, there was nothing to show for it but broken wood and bruised limbs. But the Wright brothers were not measuring their success by the flight. They were measuring it by the data of the resistance. Every crash was not a defeat. It was a lesson in aerodynamics. Every failure was a correction of their internal map. They were building the roots of aviation. They were learning the nuanced interplay of pitch, roll, and yaw. They were developing the absolute, unwavering conviction that their vision was a physical inevitability. While the world looked on and mocked the bicycle boys, the brothers were quietly, methodically, and brilliantly hardening their capacity to fly. Then, on a cold, gray December morning, in a moment that would change the trajectory of the human species forever, the machine lifted. It did not just lift, it sustained, it traveled. It proved that the years of nothing were actually years of everything. They had spent years building the roots so that when the moment came, they could command the sky. If they had abandoned their mission after the first year of crashes, the world would have remained tethered to the earth. They knew the law of gestation. They knew that their greatness was not in the flight. It was in the resilience they cultivated during the long, silent winter of their efforts. The law of gestation is the ultimate test of your sovereignty. To embody this truth today, you must implement the season of silence in your own life. For the next 30 days, commit to the stealth growth protocol. Do not speak of your definite chief aim to those who are not in the alliance. Do not look for the harvest of your current labor in the marketplace of public opinion. Instead, focus entirely on the unseen labor. Treat this time as your private gymnasium, where the only thing that matters is the development of your capacity. Ask yourself, if I knew with 100% certainty that the harvest was coming in 90 days, how would I work today? You would work with a calm, steady, and joyful precision. You would stop the frantic checking and start the deep building. This is the frequency you must maintain. You are not waiting. You are becoming. If you are ready to stop demanding the harvest before you have grown the root and are prepared to master the long game of your own evolution, subscribe to this channel. This is your signal that you are part of the alliance, the few who understand that true power is built in the quiet and that greatness is an inevitable biological result of disciplined, unseen labor. If you have made the decision to trust the seasons and to work with the unwavering faith of the Master, click the like button. Let it be your pledge to the soil of your own potential. You have now reached a state of profound inner composure. You have mastered the separation, the forge, the timing, the dialogue, the release, the architecture, and now, the patience of the harvest. You are becoming a force of nature. But a force of nature must have a channel. A river that has no banks eventually spreads into a swamp and dies. In the next chapter, we will discuss the final, critical component of your ascent, the architecture of environment. You have built the spirit, but have you built the space? We will show you how to curate your world, your physical, digital, and social environment so that your success is not just a possibility, but a default setting. You are the architect of your own atmosphere. Are you ready to clear the clutter of your life so the sun can finally reach the roots? The next phase of your mastery is waiting. Step into the sanctuary of the modern high performer, and you will find an observation that defies the conventional wisdom of our age. In the bustling centers of commerce and the quiet dens of the creative, one might expect to find a frenzy of activity, a landscape of hyperconnectivity, and the constant hum of interaction. Yet, observe the true master of their own destiny. Their environment is not a chaotic sprawl of hustle. It is a curated temple of intent. There is a profound paradox to behold. The more successful the individual, the more minimalist, ordered, and intentionally restricted their physical and social reality becomes. Look at the desk of the visionary. There are no stacks of urgent papers, no digital devices vying for dominance with flashing notifications, no social trinkets serving as reminders of a diluted identity. It is a space of surgical precision. In contrast, look at the workspace of the drifter, a visual echo chamber of fractured priorities. It is a cluttered tapestry of the unfinished, the irrelevant, and the draining. There is a specific, heavy energy to a cluttered environment. It is the static electricity of unresolved decisions. Every object, every email left in an inbox, and every half-read book is a silent demand upon the subconscious. Each one whispers, "Attend to me, fix me, or remember me." Over time, these whispers aggregate into a roar, a background frequency of cognitive drag that keeps the soul tethered to a low-level state of survival. The air in such a space feels thick, stagnant, and suffocating. It is the habitat of one who has allowed the world to design them, rather than the one who has taken the shears of discipline to prune the world around them. To look upon this environment is to see a map of the inhabitant's inner life. Where there is chaos outside, there is undoubtedly a storm within. The law of environmental determinism states that we are the product of our surroundings. This is not merely a suggestion of comfort. It is a fundamental dictate of human psychology. We are constantly absorbing the vibrations, the limitations, and the aspirations of the space we inhabit. Why do we cling to the clutter? Why do we surround ourselves with the unnecessary? The recursive nature of this behavior reveals a deep-seated fear. Why do we keep the old, the broken, and the trivial? Because the clutter provides a buffer against the necessity of change. If your life is packed with stuffed physical objects, social commitments, digital noise, you have successfully created a life that is too full to change. You have effectively insured yourself against the risk of your own potential. If you are always busy maintaining the mess, you never have to face the terrifying blank canvas of your own destiny. How does this environment dictate our outcome? It does so through the mechanism of decision fatigue. The human brain has a finite daily capacity for conscious executive functioning. Every time your eye catches a pile of unsorted mail, every time your notification dings with a low-priority distraction, and every time you sit in a space that lacks order, you are consuming a unit of that cognitive capacity. By the time you reach the work that actually matters, your engine is already half drained. The drifter spends their best hours cleaning up the debris of their environment, while the master spends their best hours creating the future. How can one break this cycle of environmental bondage? Through the process of ruthless elimination. You must understand that your environment is not something that happens to you. It is something you curate. If the environment is a teacher, you must choose the curriculum. If the environment is a mirror, you must be careful what you reflect. Recursive thinking forces us to ask, if my environment is the output of my thoughts, what do the last 5 years of my physical surroundings say about the quality of my mind? The truth is often jarring. A disorganized life is the external manifestation of a disorganized intention. To fix the life, you must fix the room. You must strip away the non-essential until you are left with nothing but the tools that facilitate your growth and the silence that facilitates your thought. This is not minimalism for the sake of aesthetics. It is monasticism for the sake of power. You are not just cleaning a house. You are reclaiming the territory of your soul. In the annals of athletic history, there is the story of Wilma Rudolph, a woman whose life stands as the ultimate testament to the architecture of environment. Born into the grip of poverty and struck by polio, she was told that she would never walk again. The medical establishment of her time saw a girl with braces, a girl of the valley, a girl whose environment was defined by physical limitation. But Wilma understood something the world did not. She recognized that her environment was not just the hospital room or the leg braces, it was the entire ecosystem of her existence. She began to construct an environment of excellence before she could even stand. She invited her siblings to play with her, treating her physical therapy as a rigorous, joyous athletic training camp. She turned her family home into a laboratory of movement. She refused to allow the language of disability to exist in her presence. She demanded that her brothers and sisters treat her as a competitor, not as a patient. She curated her social circle to exclude the pity that would have eroded her resolve. She surrounded herself with the rhythms of victory, even when her reality was the silence of a sickbed. She didn't just train her legs, she trained her atmosphere. When she finally shed the braces, she didn't just walk, she ran. She went on to become the fastest woman in the world, winning 3 gold medals in the 1960 Olympics. But look at the genius of her success. She did not achieve this because she had the best equipment or the perfect circumstances. She achieved it because she was the master architect of her own conditions. She removed the clutter of doubt, the clutter of low expectations, and the clutter of physical defeat, and replaced them with the furniture of champions. She treated her diet, her sleep, her training, and the very words she allowed to enter her ears as building blocks for a monument of speed. She knew that the environment would shape the person, so she shaped the environment first. She proved that greatness is not a matter of where you start, it is a matter of how you re-engineer the space you occupy. The mastery of your environment is a non-negotiable prerequisite for the mastery of your life. To embody this today, you must perform the total clearing. Choose one area of your life, either your physical desk, your digital environment, or your primary social circle, and apply the principle of ruthless elimination. Ask yourself, does this add velocity to my journey, or is it dead weight? If it is dead weight, remove it with the cold, precise finality of a surgeon. Your practice for today is the sanctuary protocol. Curate your environment so that when you sit down to work, the only possible outcome is success. Clear the desk. Silence the notifications. Set the lighting, the temperature, and the silence to favor your deep work. By doing this, you are not just tidying. You are creating a Pavlovian trigger for your brain. You are training yourself to enter a state of high-performance flow the moment you step into your sanctuary. You are making it so that doing the right thing is the path of least resistance. If you are ready to stop being the victim of your own surroundings and are prepared to become the master architect of your atmosphere, subscribe to this channel. This is your signal that you are done living in the clutter and are ready to live in the sanctuary. Join the alliance and start building the environment that will house your destiny. If you have made the decision to prune the dead weight from your life and create the space your vision deserves, click the like button. Let it be the physical confirmation of your new high-performance architecture. You have now mastered the art of building your own reality, mentally, spiritually, and physically. You have cleared the path, tempered the blade, and set the stage. Yet, there remains one final, critical transformation. You have done all the work to become a master, but there is a dangerous final test. You are approaching the moment of the final decision, the point where you must burn the bridges of your old life and step into a void of your own choosing. The world will call it crazy, but the universe will call it the moment of truth. In the next chapter, we discuss why you must be willing to be misunderstood and how to make the irrevocable choice that turns your potential into an unstoppable force. Are you prepared to burn the ships? The threshold is ahead. Cross it and become the person who never looks back. The air at the crossroads is thin, biting, and electric, with the static of infinite possibility. Imagine standing upon a narrow, razor-sharp ridge that divides two worlds. To the left lies the road of someday, a sprawling, paved highway, illuminated by the warm, amber glow of comfort, stretching out toward a horizon that promises everything but delivers nothing. Millions upon millions of souls walk this path. They carry the heavy luggage of could have, would have, and should have, their footsteps echoing with the monotonous rhythm of the herd. They walk with their heads down, eyes fixed on the pavement, feeling the soft, cushioned soles of their shoes and the gentle breeze of compromise against their cheeks. To the right lies a path that is not a road at all, but a steep, jagged ascent into the clouds. It is unpopulated, shadowed by the looming peaks of uncertainty, and paved with the flint of absolute responsibility. Here, there are no handrails. There is only the grip of one's own resolve. The air is cold, the climb is grueling, and the destination is hidden from sight, shrouded in the mystery of the unknown. There is a paradox that defines the threshold. The broad road is the path of the safe, yet it is the most dangerous journey one can ever undertake, for it leads inevitably to a destination of spiritual erosion and the slow, agonizing death of potential. The narrow path is the path of the daring, and though it is steep and fraught with the peril of failure, it is the only road that leads to the summit of existence. The moment of decision is the moment you stop looking at the comfortable highway and begin to feel the pull of the jagged climb. It is the moment the internal civil war, the conflict between the comfort-seeking self and the greatness-seeking self, finally reaches its crescendo. The world calls this a choice. The masters call it a cutting off. The word decision originates from the Latin decider, which literally means to cut off. A true decision is not a preference. It is a surgical operation performed upon the soul. It is the act of looking at every alternative, every possibility of retreat, every siren song of maybe later, and severing them until only one path remains. Why do the masses struggle to make this cut? It is because they mistake preference for decision. They say, I would prefer to be wealthy, or I would prefer to be powerful. But a preference is a fragile, conditional state. It is a leaf that bends whenever the wind of difficulty blows. A decision, by contrast, is a mountain. It is a foundational realignment of the psyche that remains unmoved by the storms of circumstance. Why is this internal civil war so violent? Because the lower self, the part of the psyche rooted in survival, ease, and immediate gratification, perceives a true decision as a death threat. When you decide to commit to a definite chief aim, with total, irrevocable intensity, you are effectively declaring war on your own comfort. You are telling the survival-driven part of your brain that you no longer care for its safety, only for its expansion. This creates a psychological rebellion. The lower self will throw every doubt, every temptation, and every physical exhaustion at you to get you to blink. How does the recursive cycle of the final decision work? It is a feedback loop of sovereignty. When you cut off the option of retreat, you simplify your life. You remove the cognitive load of weighing options. When you are no longer deciding if you will do something, but only how you will do it, your focus undergoes a phase shift. You cease to be a person wrestling with their own will and become a conduit for action. The master understands that you cannot build a skyscraper with maybe. You cannot ignite the forge with perhaps. The universe, in its cold, objective precision, only responds to the frequency of absolute certainty. The moment you cross the threshold and burn the ships, the moment the option of returning to mediocrity is destroyed, is the moment the universe shifts its configuration to support you. You have not just made a choice. You have signaled a mandate to your subconscious and to the infinite. I am going to the top, and there is no longer a path back to the bottom. In the winter of 1519, Herrn Kortz landed on the shores of the New World. He arrived with a small fleet and a handful of men, faced with the overwhelming task of conquering an empire that had stood for centuries. The odds were, by every metric of military science, insurmountable. The terrain was alien, the forces against him were vast, and the morale of his men was fragile, haunted by the memories of the safety they had left behind in Spain. Upon reaching the beach, Kortz did something that the common mind would call an act of madness. He ordered his men to scuttle the fleet. He watched as the ships, the only connection to their past, the only means of retreat, the only safety net they possessed, were dismantled and sunk beneath the cold, dark waters of the Gulf. As the wood splintered and the last of the masts slipped beneath the surface, Kortz turned to his men. He did not give a speech about the wealth they might acquire. He gave them a choice. You see the water where our ships once sat? If we want to go back, we must swim. By destroying the possibility of retreat, Kortz had performed the ultimate act of leadership. He had forced his men into a state of absolute binary reality. Either they would conquer, or they would perish. There was no maybe. There was no if things get too hard, we can sail back. The ships were gone. The bridge to the past was incinerated. In that moment, the men were no longer soldiers of a distant king. They were the masters of their own destiny. They moved with a ferocity, a focus, and a creative intensity that is only born when the survival instinct is redirected toward the singular goal of success. Kortz knew that if he had left the ships, his men would have spent their days looking at the horizon, dreaming of the docks of Seville. He knew that the only way to ensure their victory was to make their victory the only logical outcome of their existence. The final decision was not the battle they fought later. It was the decision to sink the ships. It was the decision to create a future that had no alternative. The final decision is not a dramatic event you wait for. It is a tactical choice you must engineer. To embody this truth today, you must identify your ships. What are the safety nets you have been keeping in place? What is the plan B that you hold in your heart in case your vision fails? What is the comfort a habit, a social circle, a belief about your own limitations that you have kept as a backup in case the climb gets too steep? You must burn them. This does not mean you must recklessly destroy your life. It means you must destroy the psychological possibility of return. Today, make the irrevocable commitment. Write down your definite chief aim, and at the bottom, write, there is no retreat. My vision is not a preference, it is my only path. By doing this, you perform the ritual of the master. You stop being a person who hopes for success and become a person who requires it. You transform your life into a mission that has no end, only the summit. If you are prepared to burn your ships and embrace the absolute, non-negotiable path of your own destiny, subscribe to this channel. You are joining an alliance of masters who have realized that safety is a myth and that the only true security is the absolute dedication to one's own power. We are the ones who do not swim back. If you have made the decision to sever the possibility of return and commit your life to the summit of your potential, click the like button. Let it be the sound of the ship sinking and the march toward greatness beginning. You have now reached the final gate of the philosophy. You have separated, forged, acted, commanded, released, organized, waited, and finally, decided. You are a different creature than the one who opened this book. You possess the map, the mindset, and the momentum. But there is one final, majestic truth to grasp the sovereign harvest. You have done the work of the master. Now you must learn to live as the master. In the final chapter, we shall discuss the overflow principle, the truth that all this work was never just for you, but for the world that is waiting to be changed by your radiance. You are about to step into the light of the sovereign. Are you ready to see what happens when the masterpiece is finally revealed? The gates are wide open. Step through. Stand now at the summit. The air here is not merely thin, it is crystalline, vibrating with the silent, terrible beauty of a life fully realized. Look down from this height, and the world below, the valley of the drifters, the fog of the conformists, the frantic, flickering signals of the marketplace appears like a distant, monochrome memory. The struggle, the heat of the forge, the sting of the cold, and the crushing weight of the journey have all been transmuted. They are no longer scars. They are the structural supports of your internal cathedral. There is a paradox that greets the master at the mountaintop. You find that the summit was never the goal, but the vantage point. You have achieved what you set out to build, yet the most profound realization is not the height of the mountain, but the expansion of your own soul. You look out over the horizon and see that the harvest you so fervently chased is not a pile of gold, a title, or the applause of the masses. The true harvest is the capacity you have become. The light at the summit is not merely illumination. It is power. It is the steady, unyielding glow of a human being who has ceased to look outward for permission and has begun to look inward for direction. Notice the stillness in your own hands. This is the stillness of the architect who knows that the structure is sound. The world down there is still noisy, still drifting, still drowning in the fog of its own creation, but you possess the secret of the fire. You have moved from the realm of the creature of circumstance to the creator of destiny. You are no longer a participant in the hypnotic rhythm of the crowd. You are a force of nature that shifts the atmosphere of every room you enter. This is not the end of the journey. It is the ignition of the sovereign. Why do so many who reach the peak of their professional or personal ambitions feel a hollow, cold resonance in their chest? It is because they have achieved the result, but failed to achieve the mastery. They have built the house, but they have not become the person who is capable of inhabiting it. The sovereign harvest is the culmination of the principle that who you become is vastly more important than what you obtain. Why is the harvest inevitably tied to the nature of the seed? Because the universe does not offer luck. It offers resonance. If you have spent the previous chapters sowing the seeds of discipline, self-mastery, clarity, and uncompromising integrity, then the harvest you receive is not an external reward. It is an extension of your own identity. The success you see is simply the outer world catching up to the internal truth you have solidified. How does this recursive mechanism of overflow function? It begins with the rejection of the selfishness myth. The drifter believes that personal development is a selfish, isolated endeavor. The master understands that it is a sacred stewardship. Why must you become great? Because a small, broken, and bitter person has nothing to offer a world that is already drowning in smallness. You do not acquire power to hoard it. You acquire it to become an overflow. When your cup is full, when your character is forged, your mind is mastered, and your spirit is anchored, you no longer have to chase impact. Impact becomes the natural consequence of your presence. How do we sustain this state of sovereignty? By recognizing that the harvest is a cycle, not a finality. The master does not retire at the summit. The master sees the summit as the next laboratory. The harvest is not the end of the work. It is the fuel for the next, even greater expansion. You are caught in a feedback loop of brilliance. The more you grow, the more you have to give, and the more you give, the more the universe trusts you with the responsibility of greater growth. This is the secret of the legend. You are not a destination. You are a river that grows wider, deeper, and more powerful as it flows toward the infinite. Consider the life of a man who held the power of an empire in his hands, yet remained anchored in the philosophy of the inward gaze. Marcus Aurelius did not seek the throne of Rome. He sought the throne of his own mind. He was the most powerful man on the planet, yet he spent his nights in a tent on the cold, brutal edges of the frontier, writing to himself. He did not write to record his victories or to catalog his gold. He wrote to refine his character. He faced a world of constant plague, war, betrayal, and decay. The Roman world was a chaotic, screaming, dying organism, yet Marcus Aurelius remained the eye of the storm. He understood the sovereign harvest. He knew that he could not control the border, he could not control the economy, and he could not control the fickle nature of the citizens. But he could control the quality of his own responses. He could guard his own thoughts. He could maintain the integrity of his own soul. When he looked at his life, he did not measure his success by the vastness of the maps he controlled. He measured it by the consistency of his self-mastery. He was a man who possessed the ultimate authority, yet he was the most disciplined servant of his own principles. He proved that true sovereignty is not the ability to command others, it is the ability to command oneself when the world is burning down around you. The harvest of his life was not the empire, it was the meditations, the map he left behind for every master who would follow in his footsteps. He proved that even at the height of external power, if the internal architecture is neglected, the man is a slave. But if the internal architecture is guarded and focused, the man is a god, no matter how much the world crumbles. He achieved the harvest of inner peace, which is the only victory that can never be stolen, taxed, or eroded by time. He stood at the summit, he looked into the abyss of his own humanity, and he chose to build something that would outlast the stone of the empire itself, the strength of his own character. The sovereign harvest is not a future date on the calendar. It is a present tense frequency. To embody this today, you must adopt the overflow protocol. You have spent the last 10 chapters focusing, forging, and building. Now, you must turn your gaze outward, not to seek validation, but to serve with the authority of your mastery. For today, identify one person in your sphere of influence who is currently wandering in the fog. Do not try to fix them with advice. Instead, allow them to witness the calm, anchored energy of your own life. Lead by the contagion of your own alignment. Speak with the precision of your new inner dialogue. Act with the disciplined urgency of the present moment. Your harvest is your presence. You are now a living testament to the fact that when a human being awakens, the world shifts to accommodate them. If you have walked this path and are ready to stand as a sovereign leader, not for the sake of the title, but for the sake of the overflow, subscribe to this channel. We are building a global alliance of masters, and your voice is required to help guide the others out of the fog. If you recognize that you are the architect of your own masterpiece and are ready to live the sovereign life, click the like button. Let it be the final, resounding affirmation of your commitment to the summit. You have reached the end of the manuscript, but the beginning of your legend. You have the master key. You have the map. You have the fire. The doors are open. Go forth and let your life be the loudest, most undeniable argument for the power of the human spirit. The world is waiting for your harvest. But beware. The summit is only the beginning of a larger adventure. There are horizons beyond this one that we have not yet even dared to name. You are now equipped for the unknown. Go, build, become. And remember, the master key is always in your hand. The journey never truly ends, it only elevates. Turn the key. Walk through. The greatness you have cultivated is now the reality you inhabit. Go in power.